A major shakeup tonight at Boeing after a string of scary incidents involving the aircraft. The company's CEO announcing today he will step down.
China's government has reportedly ordered its domestic airlines to stop accepting deliveries of Boeing jets and to halt purchases of aircraft parts from the U.S.
Overnight machinists at Boeing here in St. Louis are operating without a contract agreement.
Workers have voted down a recent offer, and the current agreement expired at midnight.
Tension is rising inside America's industrial heart, stirred not by a scandal or a sudden disaster, but by a corporate decision that rippled far beyond the boardroom. A single announcement has shifted the balance between one of the nation's most iconic manufacturers and the government that once championed it. Boeing, the emblem of American aerospace power, revealed plans to move part of its production to Mexico. What might have been a calculated business move quickly escalated into a national flashpoint. Within days, the White House answered with a punishing threat, a staggering 200% tariff on aircraft built abroad. A company that helped define American industry now finds itself cornered in its own backyard. The question is, how far will this showdown go, and who stands to lose the most? The opening scene of this story was not staged for cameras or choreographed for the public eye. It began with a private phone call, the kind of exchange that usually passes quietly into history. On one side of the line stood the President of the United States. On the other, the chief executive of a company long regarded as a national symbol of strength and innovation. The silence between them carried weight. The words exchanged were measured. Yet those brief moments set in motion a confrontation that would ripple far beyond the immediate players. Out of that tense call, a new battlefront emerged where politics collided with business, and decisions once confined to boardrooms suddenly spilled into the center of global affairs. Instead of softening the conflict, the aftermath of that conversation sharpened it. Boeing's CEO, Kelly Ortberg, chose not to yield. His stance was firm, and rather than retreat quietly, he announced to the public a decision that would soon rattle markets, ignite political outrage, and push global supply chains into uncertainty. Boeing, weighed down by years of financial strain and reputational crisis, had been searching for ways to cut costs and restore competitiveness. Moving part of its production line to Mexico seemed a pragmatic step, aligned with broader global manufacturing trends. Yet the timing of the decision collided with a political climate in which nationalism defined trade policy. What might have been a rational business move instantly became the center of a political storm. The White House reacted swiftly. Within days, the administration declared that any aircraft assembled outside American borders would face a punishing tariff of 200% if sold to domestic airlines. The language was blunt, the threat unmistakable. Boeing now risked losing a large portion of its home market, a market that had long been its foundation. Instead of pulling back, Ortberg chose to double down. He issued a statement that the company's course would not be dictated by shifting political moods, but by global competitiveness, long-term shareholder value, and the resilience of its supply chain. The tariff threat, once thought of as a weapon of pressure, now transformed into a test of whether corporations could still operate independently in a world where politics increasingly claimed dominion over economics. Behind the scenes, negotiations turned volatile. Lobbyists, economists, and policymakers argued over the potential fallout. Some warned of devastating consequences for the domestic aviation sector, while others saw the tariffs as a necessary defense of American jobs. Public debate surged. Supporters of the administration framed Boeing's move as a betrayal of national loyalty. For Boeing, however, the decision was rooted in survival, in the need to compete globally in an industry where rivals were expanding without restraint. International consequences came swiftly. China, one of Boeing's largest customers, responded by raising its own import tariffs on U.S. aircraft to 125%. Orders were frozen, contracts delayed, and aircraft worth billions of dollars sat stranded in warehouses, their future uncertain. Some were already assembled, nearly ready for delivery, yet they could not move forward. The loss extended far beyond Boeing itself. Hundreds of suppliers, transportation firms, and local economies that depended on aviation contracts suddenly found themselves facing severe disruptions. In cities like Wichita, Kansas, and Everett, Washington, the ripple effects reached workers and communities whose livelihoods were tied to every step of the aviation production chain. Boeing could not afford to stand still. Instead of passively absorbing the damage, Ortberg pivoted. he announced plans to redirect stranded aircraft to emerging markets in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. These regions, marked by rapid aviation growth and less political entanglement, represented both a lifeline and a potential new future. The strategy sent a clear message. Boeing intended to reduce dependence on Washington's approval and to assert its independence on the global stage. Results began to materialize sooner than expected. By the first quarter of 2025, Boeing delivered to 130 aircraft, a sharp increase from 83 during the same period a year earlier. Revenue rose 18%, nearing $20 billion, although free cash flow remained negative. Analysts were surprised by the pace of the recovery, and Ortberg projected a return to positive cash flow before the year's end, yet the numbers told only part of the story. Global customers, particularly in Europe, were growing uneasy. Ryanair, one of Boeing's most significant clients, issued a warning. If tariffs drove up costs, it would turn toward Airbus or even China's Comac. The message was unmistakable. Airlines valued affordability and stability, not political battles. This confrontation exposed a larger dilemma, one not confined to Boeing alone. Every multinational faced the challenge of preserving global flexibility without being branded as disloyal to the homeland. Ortberg framed Boeing's global expansion not as a rejection of American values, but as a necessity for long-term survival. That perspective resonated across industries. Corporations like Apple, Ford, and Tesla, all heavily reliant on global supply chains, watched closely as Boeing tested the limits of corporate independence under political fire. Still, Boeing's path was riddled with obstacles. The company had not escaped the shadow of its past. The tragedies of the 737 MAX crashes continued to haunt public perception, and the 2024 incident in which a door panel detached mid-flight further eroded trust. These were not minor technical errors but crises that undermined the very confidence passengers placed in Boeing aircraft. Simultaneously, Boeing's ambitions in space faltered. The Starliner program, once envisioned as a competitor to SpaceX, faced repeated setbacks from faulty thrusters to helium leaks. In one high-profile mission, the problems grew so severe that NASA astronauts were forced to return to Earth aboard SpaceX's Dragon capsule instead of Boeing's craft. Failures in space only heightened the urgency of stabilizing Boeing's commercial aviation business. Meanwhile, Airbus continued to expand globally without the same level of political resistance. Its ability to navigate international markets highlighted the tightrope Boeing was forced to walk. On one side, it needed to remain competitive by diversifying production and pursuing international opportunities. On the other, it had to demonstrate loyalty to its home country, particularly given the tens of billions of dollars it relied on through defense and aerospace contracts with the U.S. government. Lawmakers increasingly questioned whether Boeing's actions aligned with national interests, and scrutiny only intensified as the conflict deepened. The private call between the president and Ortberg later came to symbolize a pivotal moment. The exchange, though brief, became a marker of the larger struggle between government power and corporate independence. Its repercussions extended far beyond Boeing's offices. Tariff decisions altered the entire aviation ecosystem. Suppliers, logistics providers, and labor markets all felt the strain. Every tariff not only increased costs but disrupted years of planning, forcing companies to reconsider investment strategies and long-term supply chain models. The fragility of global aviation became clear. A jetliner is not the product of a single factory, but of thousands of intricate parts sourced across continents. One political decision could unravel years of coordination and investment. The central question lingered. Was Ortberg's decision to resist political pressure a misstep that jeopardized Boeing's future? Or was it a bold assertion of autonomy in an era where corporations risk becoming subordinates to political agendas? Either way, the conflict underscored a profound reality. Businesses are increasingly forced to choose between aligning with national politics or maintaining the freedom to compete globally. That choice, once theoretical, was now immediate and unavoidable. The Boeing saga revealed that resilience in the modern economy is measured not only by financial strength but also by the ability to navigate political storms without losing direction. Multinationals now face a world where reshoring is politically attractive, yet global labor, resources, and technology remain indispensable. When the news first surfaced that Boeing intended to shift part of its production to Mexico, the reaction from the White House was immediate and severe. The president's warning was clear. If the plan moved forward, Every aircraft assembled abroad would be hit with a crushing 200% tariff upon entering the domestic market. Within that climate of confrontation, Ortberg later spoke directly with the president, pledging Boeing's commitment to national interests and emphasizing the symbolic importance of projects like Air Force One. He assured that Boeing would maintain its standards of quality and cost efficiency, meeting the government's strict expectations, while also defending the company's right to adapt to the demands of a global economy. Yet, this was no longer a hollow warning. It thrust Boeing into genuine jeopardy within its own home market, a space it once dominated. While the details of the phone call were never disclosed, the larger meaning was impossible to ignore. Boeing wanted to preserve its vital partnership with Washington while still reaching for the advantages of global markets. For a chief executive to confront a sitting president so directly was extraordinary, almost unheard of in the history of American corporate leadership at this scale. In most circumstances, CEOs prefer discretion, offering bland statements and working quietly behind closed doors. This time, the path chosen was far more audacious. The company took its position into the public eye, knowing the risks and knowing the spotlight would magnify every misstep. Whether that move will be remembered as a bold stroke of independence or an error in judgment now depends on how Boeing performs in the months and years ahead, and on how governments, investors, and international clients respond to its choices.